The sun glared against the polished glass of the downtown bank, where young white tellers in blue blazers laughed behind the counter, tapping on their acrylic nails and fixing their hair in the reflections of the bulletproof glass. It was a Tuesday. Ordinary for them, extraordinary for the man who pushed open the heavy glass door with a quiet breath, his shoes worn from years of silent battles. His name was Elijah Reed. At 38, he had the quiet confidence of a man who had built everything with his bare hands. His skin was deep brown, smooth under the harsh lights, and his eyes carried the weight of stories he didn't often tell. Today, he wore a simple gray suit, a small tear under the left sleeve that he hadn't found time to repair. His tie was plain, navy, slightly loose as he had run from another meeting just to get here in time to fix what he thought was a simple bank error. In his hands, he held papers, documents that could determine the future of the new community center he was building in the neighborhood where he grew up, a place where children could read safely, where mothers could learn new skills, and where hope could take root. He had come to the bank to fix a transfer issue, something that should have been straightforward, something he didn't expect would reveal the hidden hearts of people around him. Elijah waited patiently in the line, feeling the whispers as he stood, tall but unassuming, clutching his folder. The line moved slowly, the overhead speakers playing music that felt too bright for the heavy worry pressing into his chest. And then he reached the counter. The teller looked up, her name tag reading Samantha. She was young, in her late 20s, with sharp blonde hair and cold blue eyes that scanned Elijah from head to toe with thinly disguised disinterest. "Yes?" she asked, her voice flat, her eyes flicking to her coworker beside her, who giggled softly without even trying to hide it. Elijah cleared his throat. "I need assistance with a wire transfer. It's urgent. There seems to be a hold, and I need it cleared so I can pay contractors this week." Samantha didn't look at the papers. Instead, she cocked an eyebrow, chewing gum slowly, blowing a small bubble that popped, breaking the silence between them. "Do you even have an account here?" she asked, a smirk playing at the corner of her lips. The words cut sharper than they should have, but Elijah kept his posture steady, pressing the folder gently on the counter. "Yes, for over 15 years. I'm trying to avoid late fees on—" "Sir, you'll need to wait," she interrupted, rolling her eyes, turning to whisper to her coworker Megan, who stifled another laugh. Elijah's heart thudded as he watched the two women, their laughter soft but loud enough for him to hear the message behind it. "You're not worth our respect." "Ma'am, please," he tried again, lowering his voice, his patience stretched thin. "This isn't a small amount. It's for payroll and critical expenses." Samantha sighed dramatically, flipping her hair over her shoulder. "What's the account number?" she asked, as if each word was a burden. Elijah gave her the details, but as she typed, her expression shifted from disinterest to thinly veiled disgust. "There's a hole due to insufficient verification," she said with air quotes, loud enough for people in the line behind Elijah to hear, making him feel suddenly small. "We can't clear it without proper documentation." She used her fingers to air quote again, a mockery dancing in her cold eyes. Elijah felt heat rising in his chest. He knew he had submitted every required document. He knew this was not protocol. He also knew what this was, even if no one would say it aloud. "May I speak to the branch manager?" he asked calmly. Samantha's laugh was cold, sharp. "She's busy, sir. You can call the 800 number if you have complaints." He looked at the glass separating them, reflecting himself back. A black man in a worn suit holding on to dignity as people in line shifted impatiently behind him. some looking away, some smirking, some recording on their phones. Elijah felt humiliation rising like bile, but he swallowed it down. He refused to let them see him break. "I'll wait," he said quietly. Samantha and Megan exchanged a glance, rolling their eyes again, then returned to chatting about their weekend plans, ignoring him as he stood there holding his folder close to his chest. Minutes passed. 10 minutes. 15. 20. Elijah felt the weight of every second, but he stood his ground, his back straight, eyes forward. He thought of the kids waiting for books at the center, the mothers hoping for the training classes that would begin next week if he could pay the instructors on time. Finally, Samantha returned. "She can't see you today," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Come back another time or call customer service." Elijah took a deep breath, his fingers trembling, but not from fear, from restrained fury. He gathered his papers, nodded once, and turned to leave. As he walked out of the bank, he felt the hot sting of tears in his eyes, but he blinked them away, holding on to the promise he made to himself long ago: never let them see you cry. Outside, the sky had turned overcast, heavy with rain that hadn't yet fallen. Elijah stood on the sidewalk, gripping his folder, breathing in the cold air, letting it steady the storm inside him. "They think they won," he thought, "but they don't know who I am. Not yet." He pulled out his phone and made a single call, his voice calm but carrying steel beneath the surface. "Matthew, it's Elijah. Let's move forward with the acquisition. I want the paperwork filed by the end of the week." On the other end, Matthew Carter, his lawyer and friend, paused. "Are you sure? It's a big move." Elijah looked back at the bank, the glass reflecting the clouds above. "I'm sure," he said. "They made it personal." As he walked away, the first drops of rain began to fall, each drop a quiet promise of the storm Elijah Reed was about to bring into that bank. Not with anger, but with power. Power they would never see coming, because they saw a black man in a worn suit. They didn't see the CEO who owned the building their bank leased. They didn't see the man whose new acquisition plan was about to change their lives forever. They didn't see the man who had learned to turn pain into purpose. Elijah Reed didn't need to shout or argue. He just needed to let the storm unfold, and it had just begun. The rain fell harder as Elijah Reed walked to his car, each drop sliding down the windshield like silent prayers, whispered from the clouds. He sat in the driver's seat, breathing deeply, the steady rhythm of the rain reminding him of every time he had been told he wasn't enough, wasn't professional enough, wasn't qualified enough. Memories flooded him, of his mother working 3 jobs to keep the lights on, of his father being denied loans despite a flawless credit history, of watching neighbors lose homes because the system was built to drain rather than lift. He had fought to climb, every inch of success carved from nights of study after double shifts, of doors slammed in his face, of silent humiliations he swallowed with a forced smile. He had learned to wear patience like armor, to measure his words, to carry himself with quiet dignity in rooms that did not want him there. But dignity didn't mean passivity, and today, the line had been crossed. Elijah looked at the folder on the passenger seat, the documents damp from the rain. His eyes burned as he remembered the smirk on Samantha's face, the laughter that echoed after him as he left the bank. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about every person like him who had been treated as if their worth depended on the color of their skin or the clothes they wore. He turned on the ignition and drove, each streetlight reflecting on the wet pavement like ghostly eyes watching him pass. He wasn't driving home. Not yet. He needed to clear his mind, to let the fire inside him settle into focus. Elijah pulled into the parking lot of the community center he was building. The building was half finished, a promise in concrete and steel, the future of a neighborhood that had too often been forgotten. He stepped out into the rain, letting it soak his suit, washing away the tension that clung to him like a second skin. Inside, the scent of fresh paint and sawdust greeted him, mingling with the cold air. Elijah walked through the unfinished halls, imagining the laughter of children, the soft conversations of mothers learning to build resumes, the quiet hope of a community finally given a chance to rise. His footsteps echoed on the concrete floors as he reached the main hall, where the scaffolding still framed the high windows. This place was why he fought. This was why he would not let Samantha's smirk be the final word. Elijah pulled out his phone and dialed Matthew again. His lawyer's voice was calm, reassuring, but beneath it was the unspoken question. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Elijah's voice was steady. "Matthew, draft the purchase agreement. I want to acquire that branch." Matthew exhaled a soft laugh of disbelief and admiration. "You're really going to do this?" "They think they can humiliate people because they think we don't have power," Elijah said, his voice low, each word weighted with memory and promise. "It's time they learn what power really looks like." The next morning, Elijah walked into his office where floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, the clouds parting to reveal a clear blue sky, as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for what was to come. His assistant, Naomi, a sharp-minded black woman with a presence that commanded respect, was already there sorting through files. "They called again," Naomi said, handing him a list of contractors waiting for payment. "If we don't get the transfer cleared, the roofing will be delayed." Elijah looked at the list, then at Naomi, seeing in her the same resolve that burned in him. "We're handling it," he said. Naomi nodded, trusting him. She had seen him build this company from a tiny office with peeling paint and second-hand desks into a powerhouse that employed dozens in the community, providing fair wages and second chances to people who had been written off elsewhere. Elijah spent the morning in meetings, but his mind remained anchored in the memory of Samantha's smirk. It wasn't about revenge, it was about respect. About teaching people like her that you cannot measure a man's worth by the car he drives or the shoes he wears. At noon, Matthew arrived with a folder thicker than the one Elijah had held at the bank. The purchase offer for the entire building that housed the bank branch was finalized, a strategy they had discussed months ago as part of their expansion. The difference now was personal. Elijah flipped through the documents, each page a quiet declaration of his resolve. "Are you prepared for the backlash?" Matthew asked, his tone measured. Elijah looked out the window, the city stretching before him, alive with possibility. They should have thought about that before they decided who deserved respect based on skin color. 3 days later, the papers were signed. Elijah Reed's company now owned the building. Every floor, every window, every brick. Legally, the bank was now his tenant. Their lease up for renewal in 3 months. Elijah didn't celebrate. Instead, he spent the night walking the halls of the community center, the construction lights casting long shadows as he planned what was next. The following week, Elijah walked into the same bank, this time wearing a tailored black suit that fit him perfectly, a crisp white shirt, and a tie the color of storm clouds. He carried no folder, no papers, just himself. This time, he wasn't there for permission. He was there for accountability. The security guard opened the door for him, nodding respectfully, sensing the authority Elijah carried like a quiet storm. Customers glanced up, some recognizing him, some unaware that the man walking in was about to change the course of every life in that room. Samantha was at the counter, her laughter softer this time, but her eyes still sharp, still measuring who was worth her time. Elijah stepped up to her counter, looking her in the eyes. "May I help you?" she asked, her voice rehearsed, polite but empty. Elijah leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "I believe we have unfinished business." Samantha's eyes narrowed, confusion flickering across her face before recognition dawned. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Elijah continued, "You judged me last week based on what you thought you saw. Today, you'll see the truth." He stepped back, and two men in suits entered, handing papers to the branch manager who had stepped out to see what the commotion was about. The papers were official. Notices regarding lease renewal negotiations, conditions, and a clear message that the future of the bank in this location was now tied to Elijah Reed's terms. Samantha's face drained of color as she read the papers over her manager's shoulder. The laughter was gone, replaced by the quiet reality of what power truly meant. Elijah turned to leave, pausing at the door. "I don't need your respect," he said softly, turning his gaze back to Samantha, his voice calm but powerful. "But the next person who walks in here deserves it, no matter what they look like." As he walked out, the sun broke through the clouds, light spilling onto the sidewalk, warm and clear. Elijah Reed did not look back, because he didn't need to. The lesson had been given, and it would echo in that branch long after he was gone. He stepped into the future, not with vengeance, but with the quiet, unshakable dignity of a man who knew exactly who he was, and who had shown the world what true power looked like. The city was waking up, the sunrise painting the skyline in hues of gold and crimson as Elijah Reed walked through the quiet streets, his polished shoes clicking softly on the pavement. Each step felt deliberate, every breath a silent promise to the boy he once was, standing outside banks with his mother, watching her count every dollar before stepping inside to beg for a loan she never received. That morning, Elijah wasn't returning to the bank as a customer, nor just as the owner of their building. Today, he was returning as a mirror, reflecting back to them every act of silent cruelty, every dismissive glance they had given to people like him. It wasn't about revenge, it was about shifting the ground beneath their feet so they would never again stand comfortably on the backs of others. He arrived at the community center construction site first, walking through the halls as workers nodded respectfully, knowing who he was, but more importantly, knowing what he stood for. He paused to talk to a young worker named Jamal, whose mother had once been denied a small business loan at that very bank. "Keep pushing, Jamal," Elijah said, resting a hand on his shoulder. "We're building more than a center here. We're building futures." Jamal's eyes lit up with hope, the same hope Elijah's mother once carried in her tired eyes. That hope was sacred, and it was worth fighting for. Later that morning, Elijah sat in his office, the city bustling below, his mind sharp and calm. Naomi entered, holding a tablet with the latest financial reports and social media chatter. "People are talking," Naomi said, words getting around about what happened at the bank. Elijah took the tablet, scrolling through messages from strangers and community members alike. "Thank you for standing up for all of us." They needed to see that power doesn't always look like them. You've given us hope. Each message fueled him, not with pride, but with purpose. Schedule a meeting with the regional manager of the bank, Elijah said, his voice even. It's time they understand who they're dealing with. Naomi raised an eyebrow, a small smile forming. You're not going in alone, are you? Elijah looked up, meeting her eyes. No, this time we're bringing everyone they've ignored with us. The day of the meeting, Elijah didn't arrive alone. He walked into the conference room with Mrs. Harris, a local teacher denied a mortgage despite perfect credit. Jamal's mother, who once left the bank in tears after being humiliated by a loan officer, and Mr. Deshawn, a small business owner who was told he wasn't the right fit for the bank's investment programs despite a profitable record. The regional manager, Mr. Whitaker, a tall man with thinning gray hair, shifted uncomfortably as Elijah introduced each person by name, their stories echoing in the sterile room. We're not here to negotiate leases, Elijah began, his voice calm but unyielding. We're here to discuss accountability. Whitaker tried to maintain his composure, but the weight of the stories, the quiet dignity in the eyes of those who had been wronged, made him falter. Elijah leaned forward. You will not continue to profit off this community while disrespecting the people who built it. We're establishing a new community loan program, operated transparently, with fair interest rates and equal opportunity access. Whitaker's mouth opened, but no words came. If you refuse, Elijah continued, you can vacate your branch when your lease expires. We will bring in a credit union that actually serves this community. The silence was heavy, filled with the unspoken reality that the power dynamics had shifted irreversibly. Whitaker finally nodded, defeated. We'll cooperate. Elijah leaned back, the hint of a smile crossing his face, not out of arrogance, but out of quiet satisfaction. The bank would change, not because it wanted to, but because it had to. That afternoon, Elijah walked through the streets of the neighborhood, watching children play, mothers pushing strollers, fathers walking home from overnight shifts. He stopped by a small cafe owned by Mr. Deshawn, who greeted him with a handshake and a warm smile. You did it, Deshawn said, his voice thick with emotion. Elijah shook his head. We did it. They sat, drinking coffee as the sunlight streamed through the windows, a symbol of the change quietly sweeping through the community. It wasn't a revolution of violence or anger, but of steady, determined action. Later that week, Samantha, the bank employee who had smirked and mocked Elijah, was transferred to another branch. She packed her things in silence, her eyes meeting those of customers who watched, whispering about what had happened. She realized, too late, that power was not in mocking those who appeared weak, but in respecting every human being who walked through the door. Her departure was quiet, but the lesson she learned would stay with her for the rest of her life. Elijah continued to build. The community center opened 6 months later, providing job training, financial literacy classes, childcare for working mothers, and small business incubators. The bank, now operating under community terms, became a place where people were treated with dignity, where Jamal's mother could walk in without fear, where Mrs. Harris could finally get the mortgage she deserved. Elijah visited often, not as a CEO towering over others, but as a neighbor, a friend, a reminder that power is not about domination, but service. On the day of the community center's grand opening, Elijah stood before a crowd of families, workers, and community members. Children held balloons, elders sat in folding chairs with pride in their eyes, and the smell of food from local vendors filled the air. Naomi stood beside him, holding a microphone. "Elijah, would you like to say something?" He took the mic, looking over the faces that had once been filled with quiet despair, now replaced with hope and possibility. "We built this together," Elijah said, his voice carrying in the warm breeze. "Not because we were given permission, but because we decided we were worthy of building something beautiful." The crowd erupted in applause, some with tears in their eyes, some clapping so hard their hands turned red. "This isn't the end," Elijah continued. "This is just the beginning. We will keep building, we will keep fighting, and we will keep proving that respect and dignity are not gifts to be given, but rights that we claim." As the sun set over the neighborhood that day, Elijah walked home through streets alive with laughter and hope. His mother's memory walked with him, every step a tribute to the sacrifices she made, every smile he saw a reminder of why he fought. Elijah Reed didn't need validation from those who once mocked him. His validation was in the lives changed, the opportunities created, and the dignity restored to a community that now stood tall, no longer asking for permission, but claiming their rightful place in a world that was learning to respect them. The bank workers had learned their lesson. The city had felt the ripple of one man's determination, and Elijah Reed had proven once and for all that true power is not loud, nor cruel, nor arrogant. It is the quiet, relentless force of someone who knows who they are and who refuses to let the world forget it. The neighborhood hadn't felt this alive in years. Word had spread not only within the small streets, but across the city. Families who had once felt invisible now walked with a quiet confidence. Vendors at the corner smiled more. Kids played without the fear of being shushed away from storefronts. And even the local bus drivers nodded respectfully to Elijah when he passed, recognizing him not as a celebrity, but as the man who had shifted the winds in their favor. Elijah sat at the edge of a community basketball court as the sunset turned the asphalt gold. Children played in worn-out sneakers, laughter ringing through the air, and every so often, they would glance at him, eyes shining with unspoken gratitude, as if they understood that they were playing on a court that existed because someone believed they deserved better. Naomi approached, holding her laptop. Her hair was pulled back, her eyes tired but burning with the same resolve that had brought them this far. "You need to see this," she said, sitting next to him. Elijah leaned over as Naomi pulled up a live stream from a local news station. The headline read, "Community-owned development takes over bank building, sets new standard for inclusive business." The anchor was interviewing Mrs. Harris, who now led the community loan board. She was speaking about dignity, about what it felt like to finally be seen as more than a credit score, about how one person's courage could unlock doors for an entire community. Naomi turned to Elijah, her voice softer now. "You realize this is bigger than you, right? It's bigger than all of us." Elijah nodded slowly, watching Mrs. Harris on screen, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about helping single mothers get loans to start food stalls, about fathers being able to buy homes for their children, about teenagers finding summer jobs because local businesses were finally getting the funding they needed. "It's exactly what it needs to be," Elijah replied, his voice steady. "It's not about me, it's about us." But not everyone was celebrating. In the polished glass offices of the regional banking headquarters, whispers turned into meetings, and meetings turned into panic. The managers who had once smirked at Elijah's presence were now fielding calls from the corporate board, demanding explanations about community backlash and the public relations nightmare that had unfolded since Elijah's intervention. Samantha, the teller who had humiliated Elijah, now sat in her new branch, eyes on her reflection in the monitor. The smirk she once wore had faded, replaced with the weight of realization. She overheard co-workers discussing how the branch she had been transferred from was now operating under community guidelines, thriving under the leadership of the very people they once dismissed. A quiet dread settled in her heart. She had been part of the problem. Meanwhile, Elijah prepared for the next phase. Inside the newly opened community center, local business owners gathered for a town hall. Many still unsure if they could trust that things had truly changed. They had been burned before, after all. Promises made by politicians who disappeared after Election Day, organizations that folded when donors pulled out, and banks that smiled until it was time to approve a loan. Elijah stood in front of them. No podium, no notes, just him, raw and honest. "I won't promise you miracles," Elijah began, his eyes moving across the faces in the room. Young mothers holding babies, elderly men with calloused hands, teenagers who wore hope like an oversized coat, not sure if it would fit yet. "What I will promise is that this center, this bank, and this neighborhood will never again operate under fear." A mother raised her hand. "What if they try to take it back?" Elijah smiled, the kind of smile that came from a place of unshakable resolve. "Then we remind them who really holds the power here." Applause erupted, not loud but firm, the kind of applause that came from people who had spent too many years being told to stay silent. In the following weeks, Elijah worked day and night, meeting with community leaders, training volunteers, and ensuring that the new loan program was accessible, transparent, and fair. Naomi helped coordinate partnerships with local schools for financial literacy classes, ensuring that young people understood how to build credit, save money, and avoid the traps that banks once used to keep them in debt. One evening, as the city lights blinked below, Elijah stood by the large window in the community center, watching the world he had helped change. Naomi joined him, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "You know, you could have just walked away after you bought the building." Elijah took the coffee, inhaling the steam. "And leave it to become another symbol of power that doesn't serve the people? No, I had to do more." Naomi's eyes softened. "You did, and now look." Below them, the community center's lights glowed warmly and people moved in and out. Kids laughing after tutoring, parents discussing job openings posted on the community board, elders gathering to share stories over tea. It was alive, a living, breathing testament to what was possible when power was returned to the people. But change always attracts resistance. One morning, Elijah received a call. The corporate office was sending auditors concerned about the new direction the branch was taking under the community model. It was an attempt to intimidate, to reassert control, to remind Elijah that the system didn't like being challenged. Elijah hung up, a calm determination washing over him. Let them come. The day the auditors arrived, Elijah met them at the branch's entrance wearing a crisp gray suit, his presence commanding but not arrogant. Behind him stood Mrs. Harris, Jamal's mother, Deshaun, and a few volunteers who had helped transform the branch into a place of dignity. The auditors tried to question procedures, to look for cracks, but what they found was a system more transparent and effective than anything they had seen in the corporate model. Loan records were meticulous, repayments tracked fairly, and customers spoke with a kind of hope and trust that was impossible to fake. When one auditor tried to corner Mrs. Harris, questioning her qualifications to manage loans, Elijah stepped forward. "Her qualifications?" Elijah echoed, his voice calm but resonant. "She has spent her life in this community, understanding its needs better than any of your spreadsheets could." She knows the names, the families, the dreams you treat as numbers. That is her qualification. The auditor fell silent, the room charged with a quiet, victorious energy. As the auditors left, defeated, the community gathered outside, clapping softly, some with tears in their eyes. It was a moment of collective triumph, a moment when the invisible became seen, when those told they were powerless realized they had always held the keys to their freedom. Elijah raised his hand, signaling for quiet. "This is your victory," he said. "This is what happens when you refuse to accept less than you deserve." Naomi stepped forward, holding up her phone, capturing the moment as children stood on tiptoes to see, and elders nodded with pride. Later that night, as Elijah walked home, the moon high above the quiet streets, he felt the weight of everything they had accomplished. His mother's memory walked beside him, her voice in his heart reminding him why he had started this journey. Not for revenge, not for recognition, but for dignity, for respect, for the promise that no child in this neighborhood would ever stand outside a bank, watching their mother's face fall in shame, feeling invisible. Elijah Reed had changed the narrative, and in doing so had given his community the most valuable gift of all: the knowledge that they could demand, build, and protect their own futures. Elijah stood in front of the mirror that morning, adjusting the lapels of his deep charcoal suit. The quiet hum of the city came through the window as dawn painted soft amber streaks across the floor. His reflection showed a man no longer burdened by proving his worth to those who had dismissed him. Today was not about vengeance or proving them wrong. Today was about proving that systems can change when people decide they've had enough. Downstairs, Naomi was waiting by the door, her hair pulled back, eyes alert and steady. She carried the folder that had become their symbol, a folder filled with community-approved projects, loan requests now funded, testimonies of families saved from eviction, and small businesses that had found life again because of one moment of courage that started it all. "Ready?" she asked. Elijah took a deep breath, nodded, and together they stepped into the morning, leaving behind the shadows of what used to be. The bank branch, once cold and sterile, was now alive with color. A mural by local artists stretched across the lobby, depicting hands of different shades reaching upward toward a single light. Potted plants lined the windows, and a community message board overflowed with flyers for tutoring, job postings, and neighborhood watch meetings. Today was the official handover ceremony. The bank's higher-ups, pressured by public outcry, financial losses, and the viral movement that Elijah's story had sparked, had agreed to fully transition the branch into a community cooperative, co-managed by the people it served. Elijah walked through the doors to see the crowd gathered. Faces that had once looked down when he entered the bank now lifted with hope. Children sat on parents' shoulders. Older folks with walkers found space to watch, and Jamal, the teenager Elijah had mentored, stood at the front, recording the moment on his phone with trembling hands. A hush fell over the crowd as Elijah approached the podium. Elijah looked over the crowd, letting the silence speak for itself before he began. 2 years ago, I came into this bank to ask for help. Elijah's voice carried with quiet power, resonating through the hushed space. I wasn't asking for charity. I wasn't asking for favors. I was asking for the dignity every human being deserves when they walk into a place that is supposed to serve them. His eyes flickered across the crowd, landing on Samantha, the teller who once denied him service, now standing with her head down, tears threatening in her eyes. "You know what happened next?" Elijah continued, a small, sad smile on his lips. "But what you don't know is what happened inside of me when I walked out that day. It wasn't anger that drove me to change this place. It was the memory of my mother, standing in line at a different bank, clutching a deposit slip, her hands shaking as they denied her a loan for medicine. His voice cracked, just for a moment, before he continued. They thought denying me service would teach me my place, but it taught me something else, that we can't wait for someone to give us permission to change the world. We have to take it back ourselves. The crowd erupted in soft applause, many wiping tears, others nodding in agreement. Naomi stepped forward, handing Elijah the folder. He opened it, showing the assembled reporters, local officials, and community leaders the approved projects. These, Elijah said, lifting the folder, are what happens when a community is trusted, when they are given access to their own power, when they are treated not as risks, but as people. The projects included a daycare center run by single mothers, a tutoring program for youth at risk, a small grocery store run by a local family, and a mechanic shop employing young men who once faced discrimination in hiring. These are the real investments, Elijah finished, closing the folder gently. As the formalities ended, the crowd turned into a celebration. Music played, children danced in the lobby, and people lined up to shake Elijah's hand, some hugging him, others simply placing a hand on his shoulder with gratitude in their eyes. Samantha finally approached, tears streaking her face, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry," she whispered, barely able to look up. "I didn't see you. I didn't see any of you." Elijah paused, then placed a hand on her shoulder. "You see us now," he said softly. "That's what matters. Help us build this right." She nodded, overwhelmed, stepping back into the crowd. Outside, reporters surrounded Elijah, asking about what was next for him. "I'm going to keep doing what I've been doing," he said calmly, the city's skyline behind him, helping communities take back their dignity, their power, and their futures. "Do you feel vindicated?" one reporter shouted. Elijah looked at her, the corner of his mouth lifting in a smile. This was never about revenge. It was about responsibility. In the weeks that followed, the story spread across national outlets, becoming a symbol of hope in a world that often seemed indifferent. Other CEOs and community leaders reached out, asking how to replicate the model. Neighborhoods in other cities began organizing, inspired by Elijah's example, determined to take back control from systems that had failed them. The branch itself became a beacon of what was possible. It was not perfect, but it was alive. People were heard, treated with respect, and the profits were reinvested into the community rather than siphoned away. Elijah and Naomi continued their work, developing programs to train community leaders, teaching financial literacy in local schools, and mentoring young people to prepare them to take over when it was their time. One evening, Elijah found himself walking through the neighborhood, the soft glow of streetlights illuminating the path. He paused outside the branch, now quiet for the night, the mural on the wall lit softly by the security lights. Jamal walked up beside him, taller now, holding a camera around his neck. "You still filming everything?" Elijah asked, smiling. Jamal grinned. "Every day. You told me stories matter, right?" "They do," Elijah nodded, looking at the mural. "They're how we remember why we fight." Jamal lifted his camera, snapping a photo of Elijah standing in front of the mural. "This will be in the documentary," Jamal said. "I'm going to tell them everything, Mr. Reed." Elijah looked at him, pride and warmth in his gaze. "Make sure you do, Jamal. And make sure you tell them this is just the beginning." Elijah Reed's story became more than just a tale of a CEO who returned with power. It became a living blueprint for communities reclaiming their futures, a reminder that true wealth lies not in money or status, but in the ability to lift others and build systems that see people for their worth, not just their wallet. And in the hearts of those who once felt invisible, a quiet, powerful certainty took root. They would never be invisible again.